This is episode 239 of the Beyond the Food Show, and today we talk to Ann about her 40-year journey with food and body image. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Going to Beyond the Food Show. I'm Stephanie Dozier, clinical nutritionist and emotional eating expert, creator of the Going to Beyond the Food method, and founder of the Going to Beyond the Food Academy. Corporate executive turned health expert with my own journey with weight, body image, and food. It's now my mission to help smart, successful women like you live confidently right now and unconditionally. Ready, sister? Let's do this. Hello, sisters. Welcome back. And I'm excited about today. We are bringing back a segment, an episode format we haven't done in months now. And that segment is called She Share Her Story. And that episode type feature one of our students of our program that has healed her relationship to food and body. And the intention for these episodes is twofold. Number one is to serve as a means of inspiration for you, the listener, to take the first step toward healing your relationship to food and body and to see that it is possible. And Ann today is a freaking amazing example of that. Her journey with food started at the age of 14 years old. I'll talk to you about that in just a little bit more, but she's amazing. And the second fold is to serve for the student to wrap up their own healing with food and body image by sharing their story. I'm planning on doing an episode on the different stages of healing. And when we look at how humans heal, sharing, coming to term with your own story is the end phase of healing, where you can look back at your journey and see it with compassion and see it as an opportunity to learn, right? Because when you're in the throes of it, you're kind of sometimes resentful, angry as to why things happen, and you can't see the positive of it. But when you're at the end of it, sharing is in this extremely powerful stage of healing. So that's the intention behind these episodes. And it's also to show you what happens during the process of the Going to Beyond the Food method. And most of the students featured on this segment of She Share Her Story are part of our signature program, the Going to Beyond the Food Academy, a 6-month journey through our 5 pillars of healing: mindset, emotional intelligence, mindfulness, intuitive eating, and body acceptance. And that's what Ann did. So a little bit of background on Ann. Ann is a vibrant 55-year-old woman, a retired teacher, a wife, a mom, and she has had a journey with dieting, food restriction, healthism, dissatisfaction with her body for 40 years. Prior to coming here, as I said earlier, her journey started at 14 years old. And this is what we're going to talk about at the beginning of this interview, is how one single comment from one caregiver triggered this 40 years battle with body image first, and then obviously triggered into a battle with food, because that's the mechanism we use to change our body image is food. Always remember, no matter who you are and how much you struggle, if you struggle with food, it's 99% guaranteed that the root cause is body image. And that's going to be the starting point of our interview. And then from there, we're going to show through Ann's stories the side effect of chronic dieting through her own life, how it affected her relationship with her partner, and ultimately the health crisis that it triggered her to actually give up dieting. Like, she had to have some health issue, like most of us, like me, to actually do the work. And that's the hope of these episodes, is that we're going to avoid that for you, that it goes as far as that, right? And then the last part of the interview, we're going to talk about why, for her, reading books, even the intuitive eating books, wasn't enough for her to change her relationship to food and body image. And then we'll go into the work she did over the 3 months in the Going to Beyond the Food method that brought her to the state of peace with food and body. So I really enjoyed this interview, and I think it's going to serve many of you. So you ready? Let's hear from Ann. Welcome to the show, Ann.
Hi, Stephanie.
This is a podcast version. It's the first time ever that Ann is on the podcast. So welcome to this experience.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, thank you for putting yourself out into the world and sharing your story, because this interview is about lived experience and shared experience. So, Ann, I put up this post in one of my group programs. I said, I'm looking to interview some of you. And right away, Ann raised her hand. She's like, me, I want to share my experience. And we'll share at the end of the interview how it unfolded for you and how it brought even more healing for you. We'll keep that for the end. What I'd like to do first is to talk about your relationship to food, how it started. So if you were to paint a picture for the listener of your journey with food and body weight.
Okay, yeah. With my first 14 years, I had actually a pretty normal relationship with food and body.
Mm-hmm.
I had never really thought about my body or food. It was in its place. And then I was triggered by one single comment.
At 14 years old, right?
And when I was 14, my dad made an innocent comment. I mean, he only wanted the best for me, but I think he found out from my mom that I had just gotten my period. And he took me aside and said, okay, well, now that you're, starting to become a woman, you have to watch what you eat, because otherwise your hips will spread. And I had never thought about my body in any other way, except I was able to run and dance and do things I liked. And all of a sudden, I thought about it differently. It just went from unconscious to, oh my gosh, now I have to watch everything that I eat. And, I was a perfectionist child. So, you tell me I need to do something, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it in spades. So anyways, that started a huge amount of starvation, actually, because I knew nothing about dieting. Nobody in my family ever talked about it. And so in a period of 4 months, I lost a great amount of weight to the point where I was diagnosed with anorexia.
Mm.
And it was at the very beginning of that being a diagnosis. My doctor didn't even know what it was. He was looking through his medical books and he was sort of scrolling his finger. Anyway, so that was that. And my hair had fallen out. I lost my period, all these things. And so my parents, at that time, there was no kind of healing for it. There was no kind of therapy for it. Nobody knew anything about it. So they just forced me to eat. So that launched me into 2 or 3 years of now making up for, I had lost about 25 pounds, and I was a 100-pound child, like a little, tiny thing. And so I would, of course, what happens after you starve yourself for 4 months, you go the other way. And then my mom started coming in with, oh my gosh, you're getting fat.
Mm.
So now I was on sort of the other end. And I mean, again, it was fat according to her. It was probably normal for somebody of 15 years old by then. Anyway, so that's when I started, sort of binging and then restricting and binging and restricting. I did this for a few years. Then I was triggered by, I had a boyfriend and all of a sudden I wanted to be thin. So I went to a clinic called the Toronto Women's Clinic. And again, you give me rules to follow and I'm going to follow them. So of course I lost the weight that my mom didn't like. And I was thin. And again, I felt horrible, just like I had done before. And so, of course, the binging starts again, and you feel so out of control. when you're not doing that, you just think life is normal. But when you're binging, something's wrong with me. Something's wrong. Anyway, so I, of course, gained weight, and I gained more weight that time. And this is when my mom was really, really kind of picking on me and watching what I was. Not only was I having to watch what I ate, but she watched what I ate. And it just made me feel so broken and self-conscious and not worthy, not worthy. I just kept feeling worse about myself. I went off to university, and my first year of university, I felt for the first time in my life, I felt fat, and that's not how to start living away from home when everything is unstable. So that was a very difficult period because I did not have control of myself, and I didn't feel that I deserved anything that other girls deserved in terms of, going out with guys and so forth. So I felt like that for a little while. And then I met somebody, and he was a really great guy. He was more like a friend to me. Like, he was a really, really good guy, still is a good guy. We dated for years. I knew he was a good man. He's a good person. So I figured this is who I have to hang on to. Did I love him? Well, that was not for me. I did not deserve that. That was never going to happen. I was told that by my mom, that men like thin women. So, if he likes me, then, well, lucky me. That was that. We got married. Good guy, still a great guy. He's the father of my children. Wonderful man. Anyways, we were married. Then we divorced after 11 years. And then it was always, in order for me to move on to another relationship, I had to take care of my body. I had to get thin. And so it was always exercise a lot, eat less, and then that would work for a while, then binge. And on it went like that. That went on for a few years. Then I went into a third period of restricting seriously. And again, lost all the weight, and still I felt horrible, not just physically, but I did feel physically horrible, but I also felt worse about myself, because all the things you think are going to come true when you're thin and, acceptable, they don't come true. Like, nothing had changed. Like, I just thought magically one day, certain things were easier. Yes. Certain people would look at you that wouldn't look at you before. You might have gotten approval from, say, mom, who might have thought this was amazing. But beyond that, I was an empty shell. So that wasn't good at all. So I went on for 20 years after that of no dieting. But after all the reading I've been doing, I realized I was restraining. So, I wouldn't allow myself what other people were allowed. So, if we went out for coffee, my friends would have a coffee and a piece of, carrot cake, and I would have a coffee, because that's not for me. I can't have a piece of carrot cake. So I did that for 20 years. And then, of course, behind the scenes, when, everybody was in bed, I'd have to go and eat something because I was starving. And I would never stop after one piece of cake. It was just the whole cake, because the next day, for sure, I wasn't going to do this. So that was 20 years. Then I got married a second time. And this time it was the type of person that my parents approved of. So this is the type of man that, oh my goodness, Mr. CEO, Mr. Take you on vacation every other week, that kind of guy. I knew from the first month, I did like him very much. I loved him. But I suspected from the first month that he was not a good guy. But so my body was telling me that he's not a good guy, because there was all these red flags, but my head saying, oh, no, you ignore that. This is a man who can get you places in this world. You're going to have prestige, you're going to have respect, all these things that my parents valued. And I don't want to make them sound terrible. They're lovely, lovely people. But that's how, they sort of raised me to aspire to anyway. So here was this man who, on paper, wow, he was just, he was very educated, very smart, great conversationalist, fun, but he had this undercurrent of, and I didn't see it at the time, but complete control. I couldn't be with him and be with my daughter. I couldn't be with him and have 10 friends. I had to be with him. And so my world got smaller and smaller. And when I look back, one thing he said to me all the time was, you are so beautiful to me. And at the time, I felt this feeling in my body that it just didn't feel right to be told that. I am so beautiful to you. That just made me feel worse each time I heard it, because I thought, oh, like, I'm lucky that you think I'm beautiful. So again, ignoring all my body sensations, ignoring all my instincts. There were many other things, but anyway, suffice it to say, we were married, and 2 years after our wedding date, I actually had to flee. I actually left him. He became more and more, not physically aggressive. The last thing he did was, we had a pool and he pushed me into it because he didn't like what I said to him. And it was nothing. It was simply, we have to go grocery shopping this afternoon, and can you please help me? Something simple like that. And he pushed me for the first time ever. It had never happened before, into the pool. And then we were in the backyard, and he said a bad word to me out loud on a sunny day when everybody else was in the backyard too. And that night I thought, okay, this is the end of this. I'm leaving. Anyway, so very long story short, I did, and never spoke to him again. And so started my life sort of anew. So then for 2 years with this new life, I was really, really knowing that, okay, if I'm going to make this work, I really have to get down to business. So buy the exercise equipment, start running. Oh my gosh, start eating differently. So no carbs, you know the story. It's, not quite keto, but certainly paleo. And it was very gradual at first, so just have a couple of meals without rice or potato. And it went on and on to the point where I noticed all of a sudden I lost all this weight again. And I thought, well, now I can start dating because I'm acceptable. And anyways, I dated one man. Again, I meet nice people. There's nothing wrong with the people that I met. But all I cared about is what they thought of me. I never cared about what I thought of them. And so that didn't last very long, but I found that I got more and more obsessive with the two relationships. So I had one relationship, and then very shortly after, another relationship. And they were the same type of men whose life did not revolve around a woman, but whose women would revolve around them. And so the more I was into these relationships, the more I restricted food, the more I would run around, the block, the more I would do my exercises, until one day it finally occurred to me, like a light bulb went off, and I thought, I'm done. Enough. I was so unhappy. And I thought, I am done with this dating. I'm done with my body being of service to others and to please others. And that's when I started doing a lot of reading. And I eventually, I discovered first Christy Harrison's podcast, the Fuck It Diet podcast, pardon my language.
It's a real thing, people.
Yes, it is a real thing. And it's very entertaining too. But I discovered you, Stephanie, and it was your style and, I don't know, your topics, and also the fact that you keep things succinct and to the point. And I didn't lose my train of thought when I was listening to your podcast. And then it just blossomed from there. After I started one of your programs, I understood what I wasn't doing before, because I had read Intuitive Eating a couple of years before. And intellectually, I knew what all those 10 principles were. They made sense to me,
Yeah.
but I wasn't applying them.
So can we just pause there
Oh, yes.
before we go further into this? I think it's a good segue now to kind of recap your story before we get to the point of healing. So do you mind saying your age? I don't know if I can say that.
Yeah, I'm 55.
55. So for 40 years, give and take, you've lived a life of dieting.
Yes.
To different degree and different flavor, and all centric around what your body should look like and maintaining or getting to that appearance.
Correct.
And that had consequence in your life in the realm specifically for you of relationship.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And somewhere, somehow, you had this aha moment. Do you mind coming back to that moment where the light bulb went on? Like, is there something that triggered it, or how did it feel for you to say, like, I really got to do something right now? I may be afraid, but I've got to do something to change this.
Okay. It was two things. First of all, when so this would have been January 2017 when I really started changing the way I ate and started on this path. As the months went by, I started having a physical pain that I'd never had before in my lower abdomen. It was just this unknown pain. And that was what was happening. And it was worsened through these two relationships. And I went through, I think, about 18 months of diagnosing with my doctor what this could be. And what they came to, at first they thought it was something reproductive.
Yeah.
And when I was in the second relationship, there were many different tests I had to have done. And when I realized that the man that I was dating at the time, I had told him that I did not want to do certain things because I was being tested for certain things. And when I realized that his words said, "Oh, I understand completely," and then his actions were belying that completely. And that's when I realized, oh my goodness, again, my needs are being overshadowed by someone else's needs. And I have a real problem here. I had a physical problem that I was dealing with, and I had a lot of fear behind it. And I realized that whether it was this man or some other person, it was no longer something that I could rely on someone else to help me with. And it just occurred to me that I was always doing whatever to please someone else. And finally I thought, no, this is it. This is me. And I am going to look at what I need. I have needs too. And it sort of happened like that, if that makes any sense.
Totally, because it's often in those moments of crisis, deep fear, trauma, accident, that we have this awakening to say, like, I have to prioritize me. Like, if I don't take care of me, nobody will. Why am I doing all of this? Like, these are all the questions I'm hearing from you that you ask yourself.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And then the pain is greater over there than the pain of potentially not being on the diet and perhaps, I don't know, gaining 10 pounds or whatever. And then there's a shift in priority.
Yes. Yeah.
Was it scary, that shifting? The stopping dieting and starting like to heal your relationship to food?
Oh, it was extremely scary because I had always believed that having a certain body made me acceptable, and not just in the dating world, but just acceptable. I was a teacher for 30 years. Like, I'm standing in front of teenagers all the time, et cetera, et cetera. And mostly not wanting to disappoint people, because when you do lose a lot of weight, people are so proud of you. And it's really hard to feel like, oh, now I have to explain myself.
Mm-hmm.
But one book that I read during that time was by Sonia Renee Taylor. called The Body Is Not an Apology.
Yes.
And that was like, I realized I did not have to explain myself to anybody. I didn't have to explain anything. And as soon as I took on that attitude, I found no one was asking those questions anymore. Because my mom would say comments like, she used to want to borrow my clothes when I got thin. And then she started saying the opposite kind of things like, oh, do you want this? It's too big for me, that kind of thing. She would do that at the beginning. She might still do that. But after reading that book, I thought, I don't care. Like, I don't have to explain. I am going through something you don't understand. And actually, one person in our community, in the Going Beyond the Food Academy community, actually reinforced that for me one day when I was saying something about how my mom's comment had upset me. And she said, it's okay, because not everybody understands what's going on under the hood. And that really helped me. Like, it doesn't matter what other people think. So yes, it was difficult to go through weight gain and then clothes buying and so forth, and the shame of that. But when I started healing, not just my relationship to food, which happened before a relationship to body, because that's still ongoing, but also my healing of my physical symptoms disappeared.
I know.
So the thinner I got, the sicker I got.
Yes.
And as I started putting on weight, and I don't have a scale. I haven't had a scale since I was in high school.
Yeah.
But I just knew. I started to feel like, I have energy to go through the entire day. I don't have to have a nap in the afternoon, that sort of thing. And my physical symptoms disappeared. So
in some way, your body was giving you a warning signal that something had to change. And when you comply with the body message, the body healed itself because there was no longer a need to send you a warning signal.
Oh, I believe it. Yes. Yeah.
Right? And that's what we talk about in our program all the time, is that our craving are a message from our body. But in the health realm, we can speak to any symptoms as a signal from the body.
That's so true. Yeah.
Right? It's the same way that a fever is a message from the body to say, hey, like, immune system is working on overdrive here. Here's a fever. It's just a symptom, a message.
That's right.
It's very interesting. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, my pleasure.
So you read out the book, you were listening to the podcast, you were working, but this is where I interrupted you. Let's start again there. It did help you, but it didn't get you to, change? Like, what was that situation there?
So when I read the intuitive eating book, I knew there was something to it because I was done with dieting. Yeah. I was done with restricting. I was done with making a smoothie and green smoothie. I was done with all of that. And I was slowly starting to introduce food based on the book. But I was always getting tripped up at this 100% permission, giving yourself unconditional permission to eat. I could not put that into practice because my belief was so strong that eating too much is bad. Eating the wrong foods is bad. Like, I know this so strongly that I resisted that. That was the thing that I resisted the longest. I was able to get more a relationship with movement that was healthier back. I no longer hurt myself running. I did more gentle yoga and so forth. A lot of things the book helped me with. But it wasn't until I joined your community. And by the way, I had joined another community before yours, about a year before yours. And it's somebody who I respect a lot, Christy Harrison. She offers an intuitive eating course. But Stephanie, it was not, there was no coaching. There was no support that the kind of support that I get from your community and you.
Oh, okay.
So I sort of just let it fall off. Like, when it didn't work, I just let it go. So it was when I started listening to your podcast, I thought, this lady, everything she's saying, I get. Like, I would listen to you on my way to work. I'd listen to you on my way to anywhere. And I thought, whoa, this is something that really, really resonates with me. And that's when I decided to join your intuitive eating course. and that was really, really good. And I had gotten farther than I had before, but when I heard about your course, the Academy course, I thought I need to get into these core beliefs because I'm full of it. I'm full of ideas that I know aren't true, but I still feel are true.
And I think for people listening from an external that are not aware, that's the difference between the intuitive eating project. I call it like the stepping stone to determine if there's something bigger behind this relationship to food. And that's what you call the core belief, right? There's something holding you back from actually just simply applying the principle. And to be honest with you and all the listener, most of us have those core beliefs that Ann calls and share, like long held stuff that we learn when we're really young, and our mind tripped us, prevents us from doing the intuitive eating 10 principle. That's what's holding us back.
Absolutely. There's so much fear behind the idea of actually listening to your body messages because, well, you're not supposed to be hungry between meals, right? That sort of thing. And then, of course, connecting to the bigger fear of gaining weight and what that would mean. And it's when you tap into the idea that, well, gaining weight, it's actually not a crime and it's actually not the end of the world. And it actually doesn't really mean anything unless you make it mean something.
And that's where the piece you're talking about, it's mainly the mindset and the self-coaching. And that's what was in the Academy that made it the difference for you. I know you had in the program, you looked like you were having a lot of aha moments, and that's what made a difference for you?
Oh, absolutely. I came farther in, how long has the Academy been going on now? Is it 3 months? February, March, April, like 2.5 months?
Yeah, almost 3 months.
Almost 3 months. In these 3 months, honestly, I have done more growth than I have in previous years. And like I said, from like the year 2000, I have read every book, Janine Roth and Carol Hirschman, Overcoming Overeating, everything. Like I've read everything. I'd be surprised if there's something out there that I don't have. So, so the 3 months of the Academy were really, it was a breakthrough because you taught us that the brain is keeping things from us. And basically, just because a thought is in your head doesn't mean it's a fact. Like that was like the biggest thing of all. It doesn't mean it's true. And I've been living my life based on basically fiction or lies. And so once you can actually admit that to yourself, all of a sudden, nothing seems impossible.
That's a great analogy. I've been living my life on a bunch of lies and it's a fiction. It's not even true.
Nope.
Because that's what dieting makes up a story in our brain. Like the diet culture makes up a story in our brain that says we need weight loss, when in fact, it's not even true.
It's not. And I know I talked to you a few times about my mom, who I love very, very much, but who has, whose ideas have caused me pain. But even in the last couple of weeks, because I feel differently about myself because of the work I'm doing with my core beliefs, I feel like all of a sudden she's not judging me anymore. And so, I mean, I'm thinking maybe she never was. Maybe she never really was. I was judging me. And I just assumed that she was through her lenses, but it was really me judging me. Because I talk to her now and like we're having these wonderful conversations and it has nothing to do with any of my fears of disappointing her because I'm not thin. So that's a big wow too.
Yeah, because I call them putting our glasses on, right? The glasses we wear, we think everybody wears the same glasses and sees life the exact same way as us, right?
Right.
And it's not. Guess what? They have their own glasses.
That's right. It seems like now that I've overcome that hurdle, it just seems so obvious. Everybody sees life through their own glasses, but I thought everybody had my glasses.
And she literally wears glasses, by the way. So I think the beautiful point of this story here is that you trusted yourself. You listened to your body, not knowing the solution. You knew you needed to do something. You picked up intellectual knowledge along the way, but you were able to be honest with yourself enough to say, like, there's something else missing because this is not clicking.
Exactly. There had to be more because I still didn't feel better. Even if I knew the information, it wasn't enough.
And that's the place where most of us are. And I know I was there for a long time because dieting teaches us to be in our head and be into factual information and counting and monitoring and restricting things, where what we're seeking, which is freedom, is the complete opposite of that.
Absolutely.
And we're trying to heal our relationship to food and body in the same way as we do everything else in life, where it's not. Like, we need the complete different set of skills to heal our relationship to food and body.
Very true. And a good example I can think of that is the sensation of hunger.
Yeah.
Although I've been working on intuitive eating for a couple of years, and certainly I know when I'm hungry, and most of the time I'm able to respond to that cue immediately. But I still was judging myself. There are some times, like if I'm more active or whatever, an hour after eating a complete meal, I feel hungry. And I used to struggle with that so much because intellectually it makes no sense. And I could hear my parents, you just ate dinner, that kind of thing. But I realized once I decided to trust that cue and have a bite to eat, like, a cookie or whatever, like whatever I felt like, just one little thing. And all of a sudden, then I wasn't hungry for another 4 hours. And I thought, that's what I've been struggling with all along. Because that one little hunger pang, I would suppress and let it go until like after my work day. And I'd come home and I was absolutely out of my mind, ravenous. And I had to, prepare dinner for the family. And yet all I wanted to do was eat. It was a terrible place to be. And yet my body was telling me 4 hours earlier, have a bite to eat. And now that I do that, I don't think about food all afternoon. So that's the best example of actually tuning into a sensation. Even though I thought I was an intuitive eater, that was sort of the next hurdle of really like putting my money where my mouth is and saying, okay, if you feel hungry, you will eat, even if it doesn't make sense in your head that you just had lunch. So that's a big, big hurdle for me that I overcame.
If I can make a parallel for you, that's what happened. One of your relationship, I can't remember which one, your gut was telling you, but you wouldn't trust your gut, your intuition. And you continued and you persisted and things got worse.
Yep.
Whereby if you had followed the cue of the gut from the beginning, you would have avoided a lot of pain and trouble.
Oh, 100%. And I talked to my sister. She's my great sounding board. And I told her this story 2 weeks ago. If I had known to listen to my instincts 4 years ago, I would not have been in that situation. It would never have developed into a marriage, for heaven's sake. Mm-hmm. And so now the thing between her and I is always, okay, what does your gut tell you? What does your gut tell you about anything?
Yes.
It doesn't matter what the topic is. What does your gut tell you? And we are both, I think, me especially, but tuning into what my gut is telling me. So is it, if I need to say this one thing to someone, don't not say it. Just if your gut tells you it's good, do it. And that's what I want to teach my daughter. I really do. Just by example, that go with your gut.
It's like when we learn mindfulness, sometimes we, in the context of intuitive eating, we start with mindful eating. Like we learn the concept of mindfulness with eating, but then it explodes to the rest of your life and it becomes mindful living.
Yes.
Intuitive eating, intuitive living.
Very true.
Can you see that for your future?
Oh, I so see it. And even just, I can tell now when I have situations, when you're rushing around and you have a moment between activities and you're just sort of, your head is spinning. In the past, that would have been like, okay, reach for food because I don't know what I'm doing. And now I actually know that means I have to sit down and take a breath. And that's mindfulness. Like wait a minute, slow down. Like just give yourself a minute to breathe and to think. And it always relaxes me. And then I think, okay, well, now I know what to do next. And it doesn't have to involve food. It could be, oh, maybe I need to go lie down. Maybe it's not as important to do the next activity right away. So mindfulness, once you start practicing it, opportunities to use it just come up during the day. It's not like you have to schedule in a meditation, which I actually do now that it's part of our program. And I'm enjoying that. But mindfulness creeps up in places where you think, this is exactly where I need a bit of a break. So a little mindfulness breathing break. And it informs what to do next instead of feeling that stress, which used to lead me to reaching for a granola bar or whatever,
Well, it allows you to tap into your intuition. I would like to close because we're coming up on our time, but I'd like to close with allowing you to give one piece of advice. If you had to meet yourself, let's say, 5 years ago, before you started or you made the choice or had the aha moment, or that person who's listening right now who's on the beginning portion of her journey, what would you say to yourself or this person?
I would say, don't think about it. How do you feel about it? Start from how you feel. Go with your gut. And if you are feeling a sensation, believe it. And it just boils down to actually trusting yourself.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else you would like to add?
There was something we talked about a little bit at the beginning about a healing moment.
Oh, yeah. What happened? So when you raise your hand, let me frame it for people. Like, raise your hand. You want to be on the podcast. Right away you said yes. And then we meet today. So what happened between that time? Like, what opened up for you or created itself for you?
Okay, so my beautiful adult daughter still lives at home, and I had never talked to her about any of my struggles with food or body image ever, not even a reference to it. I kind of did the opposite of, my upbringing was always focusing on my body. We did the opposite. We never talked about it. If you're hungry, eat. If you want this, go for it. So I'd hidden basically my journey from her. And, my books are sort of upside down. My journals are tucked away. And so I was actually considering, do I tell her I have this call today, this interview for a podcast called Going Beyond the Food? And I went back and forth, but my gut told me it was something I needed to tell her. And so I did, and it was hard. I felt, teary-eyed because I thought all this time I've never told her what I'm doing. And so I said, I'm being interviewed for this podcast. And she says, oh, that's cool. That's interesting. And then she went on to something else. And so that's fine. But me inside, I felt a moment of this opening up and this healing that was just so authentic. That I realize now that sharing the story, sharing my story is a healing for me. And it instead of hiding the shame, it actually lifts the shame. So thank you for this opportunity.
Well, so this is what's beautiful about doing these types of podcast interview is it's going to kickstart someone else's journey. There's somebody listening to you right now who my word did not reach to her heart, but yours did. This guaranteed there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people that are going to start working on their relationship to food. But as much as you're healing others, you're healing yourself. Isn't that beautiful?
That is beautiful. It is beautiful.
Sharing is healing, and it comes at the tail end of the healing phase. Like if we look at healing phase, I'm not going to maybe I should do a podcast on that, but healing phases, there's about 7 of them, and the sharing or the manifesting it out is at the tail end of it. And there's as much power in that as the beginning stages. So well done.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity and for being here and for being so supportive of your whole community. It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. And I just want to, from my heart to yours, share of how grateful I am for you to have placed your trust in me. Because I know how desperate we are and how much of a state of fear we are when we begin this journey. And I want to recognize that. And all my students, I always say thank you for trusting me, because it's a big sign for you to do that. And I appreciate it and I recognize it.
Oh, it's my extreme pleasure and honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Han, for having been with us today.
Well, thank you so much.
There you have it, ladies. What did you learn from this? I would love to hear from you if that story touched your heart, if it inspired you. Remember, that was my intention for me to share Ann's journey. I would like to also give you a couple of reflection questions. So if you are one of those women who's listened to this story here and can relate to Ann and are not yet, as Lan taught us, listen to that gut feeling that tells you you can change your relationship to food, but you're afraid. Here's a few questions that I would like you to reflect on. So perhaps take your pen and paper right now and write those down. Where do you want to be in 2 years from now? Where do I want to be in 2 years from now? If no one judged me, who would I be right now? What would I do right now if I wasn't afraid? What do I need to take responsibility for in my current life to be there in 2 years from now? What would I do differently up to now to have different result for where I am today? And the most impactful one, what stories am I telling myself that are keeping me stuck where I am right now? What stories am I telling myself that are keeping me stuck where I am right now? If you're doing the exercise of journaling on those questions, please reach out to me and let me know what you're finding out. I would really love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this episode, as always, a review means the world to me. This is my gasoline to put in my car, is your review. And it really helps us get the show to more women by ranking the podcast higher. So truly appreciate if you could leave us a review. And we have another amazing show coming up next. And the title of the show will be, What Are You Truly Hungry For? I love you, sister, and I look forward to hang out with you on the next episode.